Good evening, guys. So I'm back with my vlog again. And so I'd fallen behind on this yet again because, it's funny. I always start off these things with saying that I'm going to organize my time better and yada, 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 all these sort of things. But I really did end up falling behind because I thankfully had some extra freelance come in. And I when I was doing it, I had thought to myself, like, okay, I'm going to try and plan out, like, I don't know how many of you guys can relate to this or not, but there's a lot of times whenever I would plan out, like, using my planner, okay, these are the times I'm going to do this, whether I'm to be working on freelance, I'm going to work my work shift today, I'm going to take the time to walk the dogs or whatever. Most of all of that stuff ended up either falling by the wayside or having to be rearranged. And I felt really bad because this was something that I had told myself I'm absolutely going to keep up with. And I'd not been able to. Most of it is because by the time I would get to recording something, I was like, okay, do I script it? Do I not script it? And originally it said this wasn't going to be anything scripted. It was going to be more of just quick videos that cataloged what I was going through and what was going on. So I'm going to skip over all the bull crap kind of stuff that I was going through right now and jump directly into what I have going on. If you haven't noticed, on my website, there's a new section. It's called Creative Interviews. And I'm very happy, the very first interview that's up on there is by a fellow named Curt Hanks, and he works for the company Archie McPhee. I'm a huge fan of his work. He's a fantastic designer and illustrator. He worked on a series of action figures that they had released through, the line was called Accoutrements, but it was for Archie McPhee, and it's a bunch of little cubicle figurines based, and they're very much, I'm not going to ruin it, read the interview, but they were based very much on the whole office space sort of thing, and there's more to it, but I really liked him a lot, and a lot of the other work that he had put out, and so he was gracious enough to, answer my questions, and I think it was a lot of fun. I had made a decision some time back that I really wanted to jump into finding, like a creative, well, without making a pun out of it, finding a much more creative way to, do interviews. At first I thought, well, maybe I can interview people over Skype, and I envy anyone that can do that. I don't think I have an issue with it at all. I think it's great, but there's something compelling about being able to get it down in the written word and allow people to think about their questions, and it gives it a different sort of output. And so I was very happy. I sent him, I think it was close to 30 questions or so, and I've already reached out to a few other creators. So the genesis of the idea was that, as much as I can be weird about, like, whether or not I'm doing fan art or not, or that sort of thing, I had wanted to really delve into this whole phenomenon that's been happening for years now, the whole pop culture thing. And not in so much that I wanted to retread the same ground. I wanted to do something a little bit more educational with it. So the purpose of it was to not only give an entertaining read, but also to have a stopgap, basically an archive of different people's careers. And so some of the people that I've reached out to are illustrators and designers, more mainstream, but still working within the pop culture ideology and concepts. I've reached out to now 2 writers and a few other people. So there's about 5, no, there's 7 total, excluding Curt, who's already online, that I've reached out to, that I've sent, these questions out to, and each one of them were custom made for people. And I've got a few more that are in the pipeline that I've reached out to, and I still haven't sent anything out to them yet. But I had wanted to do this because I wanted to, when I was thinking about what I was going through brand-wise with the whole Artisan Rogue thing, I had originally started this as, not only just my own personal studio, but something that the older I get and the more kids that I interact with, the more I would like my own website to become a repository of learning. And, as much as I've admired people like LeVar Burton and Mr. Rogers and, even Jim Henson and Lucas and other people like that, not necessarily saying that they were, especially Lucas, necessarily great educators, but they all had hands in elements of that. I imagine a few of you may remember that there was the Young Indiana Jones Chronicle, which was a series that George Lucas had done that was a little bit, it wasn't as action oriented from what I remember. It's on DVD now, but it was much more of an educational take with a young Indiana Jones on it. It's still part of the mythos, I believe, and considered canon. But they all took their own, their own way to do things, but it was through television, through film. And I decided, to take a little bit of inspiration from that and maybe start to reinvent an aspect of my website into something more that would give people, I guess the thing is that you can go to a lot of YouTube channels and you can go to some websites and you can see reviews about art materials and things like that. And I have no shortage of it. I've got brushes, paint, markers, all kinds of things. And you can see those reviews online just fine. And there's a dime a dozen. But what more can somebody do with that? So I kept thinking to myself, well, maybe I can do a review that's months long, condensed down into maybe a 5-minute video. Or I can honestly go out and, talk to somebody who works in the industry and, is a knockout skilled ability, has a knockout skill ability. Jesus, I can't even speak right now. I'm going to leave that in. That's how tired I am. I'm really worn out. Who are extremely exceptional in what they do. One person that comes to mind, I've name dropped him before, is Chris Seaman. I did a small video about his cameo creeps. A lot of people don't realize that, he doesn't utilize acrylics in the same way that other people do. He uses really pretty basic, I think they're apple barrel color acrylics. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, Chris, but, and that stuns me because a lot of times, I'll be like, oh God, I need some Winsor Newtons. I need the best, media and mediums that I can find to execute whatever artwork I'm working on. And that's true to a certain degree, but if you can execute it utilizing anything else, then that just is a testament to how much better and much more skill you can put forth in your work. And so those are the sorts of things that I don't believe are they're almost always overlooked. You'll see these great videos that are shared, whether they be on Facebook or on Twitter, whatever, and it shows like these monumental works, or quick sketches or things, and it's mind-blowing. People go, oh my God, look at it, this guy's amazing. Like there was one a while back that was about like an artist, I think they were based out of Russia, that did all of their artwork with ballpoint pens. And I remember in the comment section, which is horrible, nobody should ever go and read the comment sections of anything anymore, it's just not safe. But in there, there were people that were very much like, well, yeah, it's a technique, but it's not a great technique, and really they're just copying from a photograph. And then there were others that were like, well, even though they're copying from, a photograph and that sort of thing, that there's still a determined skill set that needs to happen there, because not everybody could pick up a ballpoint pen and do this. Now, that whole discussion probably wouldn't have transpired. Well, no, I take that back. The internet is heavily opinionated. Of course it would have happened. But I think that if you pulled back the curtain a little bit and allowed people to kind of see what goes on behind the scenes, it strips away some of that romanticism and some of the idealism that exists there, because your average person, and I've said this in other videos before in the past, there's a concept that, once, when people see you at a show, when people see your work somewhere, they automatically think that, it's eclectic, it's exciting, and it's novel, it's unique, and that, you're probably really well off in doing this. And they don't really realize, like, that it's a little bit of a cliche, but the struggle is real. Artists do have to continually, work and find time while making money, while maybe even working a second job. Even people I know that are extremely well off in the art world, as far as clients and workload and that sort of thing, still have another job that will pay the bills. I mean, currently I have no insurance, and that's a very real concern of mine. I work, freelance for Hallmark, and I make pretty good money doing that. And I also do freelance work for other stuff and do design work, where I can. That doesn't necessarily translate into having the financial stability to be able to afford health insurance. And that isn't to go into any kind of political discussion or anything. It's simply a commonplace fact. And most artists you meet are probably in that same boat, especially if they're a little bit younger, or they don't have a career that spans into working for larger clientele all the time. And even then, you never know. I've known people that have been in the industry for a long time, suddenly their income just evaporates. So all that said, sorry, I didn't mean to get off on such a left turn tangent there. I wanted to dive into all of that. I wanted to be able to pull that sort of thing out. So some of the initial interviews that are on there on this new section will be very much, they're going to be kind of like, the first few feet into the water of the pool of creativity. And then I want to go back and deep dive with some of the people and, find out more about what their takes are on certain things. And I'd love to have like talking, almost talking head sort of discussions where I can maybe get 3 or 4 of them to, come together, whether it be online or in real life or something. I'm not even sure yet. That's kind of a pipe dream right now, and maybe something that I won't even realize until later in 2019. But I believe that in a podcast-like format, it could work. I'd be really intrigued to see, what comes of that. And again, most of this is because, and I can attest to this because when I was in college, even when I was in high school, there's a certain modicum that you're given in your ideology of what you're going to end up doing as an artist. And I know that I wasn't really prepared. And I've had this discussion. In fact, a coworker of mine, Ryan, we both went to school at CMSU, or UCM as it's called now. And to varying degrees, we both agree that we were not prepared for reality when we came out of there. Now, yeah, we can blame our instructors at the time, and to certain levels and degrees, we do find that there was a lot lacking in there. Him definitely more than me, but that's just because of our own experiences. I think that for myself, I probably should take a better look at what I went through. And I think what it was I never really took it that seriously because I wasn't quite sure how successful of an artist I would have been regardless of how much I paid attention in school, because I was convinced at that point that I'd either somehow end up in an animation house or in a full-time illustration job, which I did manage to do as my first job right out of college. But I think I was right at the end of where you really got hired as an illustrator. And so that being said, I don't even know what kids are going through now that are in high school or in college, but I do see what kids are going through that are in the first to fifth and sixth grade and maybe a little bit older. And it's interesting because there's more and more of a deprivation that's happening toward the arts, whether that be the visual, the musical, or the theatrical, whatever it may be. And because of that regressive growth pattern, in general, it makes me worry, because alongside with the depletion of how important that can be for a societal aspect, never mind individual growth, you end up with this void. And it's a very physical and real void that ends up happening in people's minds. Because once you start cutting back on that sort of thing, you have to wonder what the next step is. How do you recover from that? And so, although I know that my little corner of the internet, my little blog and these vlogs, they're not going to change the world. And I know that. But I do know that I've been inspired by other people who have taken the time to either create YouTube channels or repositories like blogs that have held on to other aspects, whether it be, there's a wonderful one out there that I just can't think of right now, that, this one woman is putting together a bunch of blog entries that cover Native American languages that are going away. And that's a very true thing, a form of art in and of itself. But there's other people that are, recording ways that, people cook, or that they dress, or movements of art, or things like that. In fact, one of my obsessions that I've recently fallen into with, my semi-professional photography that I've been doing for stock photography is chronicling buildings that are disappearing from the Kansas City, area. And a lot of them are just old buildings that they're either being torn down to make way for new projects, or they're fire gutted, or they're damaged from weather, whatever the case might be, or they're simply in disrepair. And so there was something that struck me with that, and that all of this beautiful architecture, a lot of these memories are going away. And I remember that struck me a long time ago when I was living in Warrensburg. There used to be a Catholic church that my parents would go to, and somewhere back when I had my old camera, that was 35mm camera, I had been out shooting photos, and I remembered that that was the day they started doing demolition on the church, and I think it was on the corner of McGee Street or something in that town. I don't recall, but there's this haunting silhouette of just the front wall, which now is essentially a facade with the door still there, but one was slightly ajar, and the sunlight was coming up over to the side of it, and it was silhouetting it pretty harsh, and it looked like, it reminded me of those, you know, haunting shots you see from World War II, you know, across Europe, where you'd see cathedrals and homes that had been devastated by bombing. And granted, this was, you know, something where they were knocking it down because they were building another Catholic church elsewhere on the outskirts of town. But there was still this haunting moment of, you know, when I did go to church with my parents, and I was a practicing Christian, whatever you want to call them, that's not so much now, that was something that struck me, that this is going to be gone. I don't know that anyone had photographs of it. And there's something about that, not just in small town America, but in, you know, anywhere in the world where that sort of stuff disappears. And, you know, I don't think it was necessarily directly symbolic for what else I found began to go away. But when I talk to kids about art, when I talk to kids in general about things like this, there seems to be an acceptance of this impermanence that we're going through right now, and that's pretty horrible. I mean, you know, we could discuss this for days, and honestly, it's ripe with subject matter you could go into. But focusing on art, it's something where I believe that with this, I'm just trying to build something of an online time capsule, and I'm, of course, smart move on my part is to back this stuff up and keep the writings and the images together offline as well, so that if something ever happens, it's there. But these things are something that I'm hoping you all will enjoy, and that as I make and write more of them, that you guys will start to have some feedback on and interact, and maybe even ask the artist some questions on this. I had been checking the analytics on that entry, that interview, and I was really pleased over just the last couple of days. I think I've broken 150 unique views, which is great. That's fantastic, and much more than I had hoped for, considering that, you know, I haven't even really put it up as, you know, I mean, I put it out on Twitter and, you know, talked about it and told some people about it, but it really hadn't, you know, outgrown from there. And I know that there's people that follow my blog, so that was nice, and all of that. But, you know, you never really know with these sort of things if it's not going to go well or not. But I was extremely pleased with the interview and how it came out, and again, you know, Curt was wonderful and entertaining, the questions and everything on there. So if you guys get a chance, please check that out. I'm going to come back tomorrow night or the next day with another entry talking about other things, but I think I've already let this entry to my blog go a little bit too long. So with that, I'm going to get to work on some stuff that I need to take care of. So I will catch you guys tomorrow.